Ordinary Guy. John sat in the high-rise office building, twiddling his thumbs nervously and crossing and uncrossing his legs sporadically. His anxious state made it difficult for him to sit still. His life was borderline dependent upon the success of the interview he had arrived far too early for. A lucrative job with a well-known oil company would be a step in the right direction, something to help him gain some measure of control over his life. John was always deemed to be the ordinary guy, a low-level office worker, lacking any goals or achievable ambitions. John blended in with the crowd and never took the initiative to set himself apart. Gentle in his nature, he didn't handle assertive people or confrontations very well. Often cowering at the mere possibility of it, he frequently fell victim to his attempt to be thoughtful and polite, as everyone stampeded past him both literally and metaphorically. In situations like these, he was always left behind, alone. To date, he had nothing to show for himself, aside from being a doormat for everyone else. After spinning his wheels for years, he finally concluded that he wanted to level up his life. Well aware that his personality could only be described as dull, he started to buy copies of the latest and greatest self-help books appearing on the shelves, all of which made grandiose promises of success through a variety of paths. It only left John more confused, especially when his attempt to slowly become more outspoken and a self-proclaimed extrovert were brushed away by others. He often watched his co-worker Max with envy. He was successful, with his shiny BMW parked out in front of the office, and Max enjoyed an increasingly high salary. Max was attractive with a bright white smile and toned forearms that were visible even through his dress shirts. Most of all, Max was interesting. When he spoke, it was clear how well versed he was in a myriad of ways, whether it be travel, current events, sports, or art. It didn't matter. Max already knew about it and could speak about it with confidence. John was the type of man who only spoke when spoken to, who preferred to walk on the side of caution than ever take a leap of faith. As a result, people rarely remembered his name or face because nothing was lasting or impressive about him. Blindly agreeing with those he did speak with got to him nowhere, and so most days he usually felt the cold shoulder from everyone around him. Due to so many negative and meaningless interactions, John began to feel paranoia creeping into the back of his mind, slowly convincing himself that everyone was looking at him with judgment and disapproval. This made it even more difficult for him to complete his daily tasks, walk into a room full of people, or even make a phone call. At first, he wasn't sure which was worse, blatantly being ignored or silently banished. It seemed always the case that the ones who judged him the most from the corners of their eyes were stronger than him, the alpha male types like Max, with their overflow of charisma and magnetism. John couldn't understand why they even cared about his never-ending failures and missed social cues. Surely they had plenty to worry about themselves, including the successful women, who seemed hypnotised by their never-ending chatter. Interview. John's racing reflections became harshly interrupted by the interviewer, who called his name for the second time with growing annoyance. John scrambled to his feet and wiped his sweaty palms on his black slacks. They were wrinkled, because he didn't take the time to iron them prior to the meeting. The interviewer nudged his nose in the direction of the single seat in the room, facing the large desk. John quietly sat down, immediately feeling how tense his shoulders and neck muscles were. He couldn't stop his foot bouncing up and down due to nervousness, and only hoped the interviewer would ignore this and press on with the questions. John could feel that his eyes were involuntarily widened, and so he attempted to blink away this fear, but it only made his glazed stare more noticeable. The interviewer was not impressed with John's entrance and grew even more agitated by his poorly phrased answers to the list of interview questions. The interviewer stared down the bridge of his nose while John stammered on, spouting purely irrelevant answers, finally rolling his eyes when John's babbling ended. The interviewer explained condescendingly to him that the entire point of a job interview was to sell yourself to the company. The interviewee is supposed to market themselves to the company's needs. With his cheeks burning hot, John, of course, knew this to be quite true. The interviewer then handed John a pen and instructed him to produce a sales pitch for it. John attempted to extol the virtues of the pen by highlighting its appearance and functionality, but his efforts fell flat, and the interviewer only glared at him, expressionless. Then John was curtly shown the door. John's shoulders sagged with shameful disappointment. Outside the office, he was met with a tall man towering over him, who had a broad stance and a grin dripping with pity. "Better luck next time, bud." He patted John's shoulder, making him feel small. John never felt as useless as he did at that moment. If he had a fraction of the personality or tenacity of the other men around him, perhaps he could have charmed his way into the job. But for now, he was quite the fool for even attempting to change the trajectory of his life. He would always be the one blending into the crowd with very little to offer. Riding the lift down to the first floor, envy struck him again, reminding him that most people can overlook a city skyline and see a world of endless possibilities. But for John, any sense of optimism was non-existent. Once outside on the street, the disapproving looks returned, seeming to target him mercilessly. Even the street sweeper had a superior posture towards him, looking at him with sympathy, or maybe just pity.
The American artist, Dennis Popper, painted his picture Night Birds in New York, in 1982. It shows a street at night, and loneliness in a big city. Solitude and desolation are key themes that appear again and again in Popper's work, even if the artist himself was keen not to accept this. Many of Popper's paintings appear to be based on images that have been stolen off the internet, and they often have a haunting and unsettling effect on the viewer. He is married to another piss artist, known as Josie. They live a quiet and unremarkable life together, apart from their occasional hell-raising weekends. She is garrulous and sociable, but he is taciturn and a passive-aggressive. When Popper paints people, they usually look strange and isolated, and show a lack of intimacy. Who are these misfits? What are they up to? The figures in Popper's paintings are rarely specific individuals, and we are given no information about them. They are faceless and anonymous, like British politicians. Critics say, Popper is one of the greatest exponents of the Photoshop filter. However, he soon grew to dislike this description of his art, and found it restricting because many people associated him with it. Just like the man himself, Popper's paintings are detached from reality. Familiar worlds are seen in a harsh and unfamiliar light. It is a world of emotional emptiness and confusion. Like being lost in Aberdeen at night. His paintings are a vision of human drunkenness and self-absorption amid the pressures and crises of this life. Popper's paintings express his view of reality in a very depressing way. His pictures are always figurative and mostly have an unsettling and disturbing effect on the viewer. They form a fractured narrative. His characters seem to have no generosity of spirit or charm. Underexposure plays one of the most important roles in all of his paintings. Hopper exhibited, in 2001, at an Inverness bookshop, and the original Nightbirds was on display. But, due to a lack of publicity, no one turned up, apart from a handful of people that he owed money.
Richmond. Another long day at the office was ending. The sun had already set, and there was a hullabaloo on the streets. Autumn had begun, and it was the perfect temperature to be hanging out with friends. Despite this, Richmond Pager was quietly shuffling past the crowds, desperate to get inside his home. He moved swiftly past the young folks who were dressed flamboyantly, trying not to choke on the strong smell of Aquanet that wafted through the air. Once he set eyes on the door to his flat, he sped up, closing the door behind him. He breathed a sigh of relief. These kids blocking the path all the time, just standing around, should be working a job instead of making a mess of the neighbourhood, Richmond grumbled to himself. The neighbourhood used to be quiet, but in the past few years the area supposedly had been revitalised, as the newspapers called it. This brought clubs and shops, and with it the type of people who wasted their money on those things. Richmond sighed again as he walked to his kitchen, just as he did every night after work. Standing over the fridge, he pulled out a microwavable dinner. No home-cooked meal awaited him. Richmond had studied and outsmarted many people, eventually making it to the C-suite with the popular pharmaceuticals brand. He spent his long days reviewing research and translating this into simple terms for his company and the public. However, this came at the cost of a wife and family. The beep of the microwave imposed into his internal focus. He placed his dinner on the table facing his front window, which was illuminated by a street lamp just outside. Before seating himself, he went over to the only piece of tech in a flat otherwise filled to the ceiling with books. Richmond ran his fingers over the top of his beloved hi-fi record player. He was about to start the player when he heard a boisterous laugh from outside. It caught his attention more than usual. "Do they have to be so loud?" Richmond asked to himself. What could be so funny? That they have to disturb everyone else's evening just to muck about. His trail of thought continued. Realizing he had left his window slightly open, slightly ajar, Richmond stomped over and shut it before sitting down to methodically consume his dinner. He glared at the group just outside his front garden fence. Young men and women dressed so you don't know who is who. Not that they were dressed very manly to begin with. Richmond's inner monologue continued. Everyone wearing enough makeup to look like a slag. Colours that make it look like a rainbow drop from the sky on them. Richmond examined each person in the group like he would in the lab, and these youths were his subjects. Closely staring at each of them, one character stood out to Richmond. He stared intently through the window at them as they used a motorbike's mirror to touch up their bold pink lipstick. This person made Richmond freeze in his chair. The person stood up and stared right into the window that Richmond was sitting in, and there was a brief moment of eye contact between the two. It was in this moment Richmond began to flash back to a memory from his youth. He was under some kind of hypnosis from the lipstick, it seemed. This memory had come up more and more recently, ever since the area had been revitalised and the so-called new romantics started to roam about. Richmond had tried to bury this memory over the years. When Richmond was a young boy, he would watch his mother get ready every day. This was many years ago, a different era to the one of excess he lives in now. Despite the war having just ended and supplies still low, his mother was proud of her looks and made sure to dress and put on makeup every day. She was a good seamstress too, and had repurposed many hand-me-downs to look fashionable. Richard's mother always chose something colourful to wear. These bright outfits made all the neighbours smile as they ran their errands. One day, The doorbell rang, just as his mother was finishing dressing. Richmond loved how his mother's bright outfits brought joy to others. He wanted to join in and bring that same joy. Richmond crept over to his mother's vanity desk. Her lipstick was still out, a beautiful shade of pink. His small hands carefully grabbed the tube. He traced his lips. He was not perfect, and he had trouble staying in the lines of his smile. He admired his look in the mirror. Seeing his lips bright pink brought joy to himself. Then his mother came back into the room. She stopped quite suddenly at the sight of her son. "Richie, darling, you take that off now. You look like a twit with Mummy's lipstick on," she scolded. Despite not raising her voice, Richmond could tell that Mother was displeased. She rarely got displeased, which made this displeasure seem worse. He felt the heat of embarrassment rise from his heart into his cheeks, and tears welled up in his big doe eyes. "Don't cry. Let me get you a towel," Mother continued. Once she got a towel, she sat Richmond on her lap and began to wipe the lipstick off his face. "You can't wear that, love. People will think you're some sort of nutter. Just to think how silly that would be, my boy wearing lipstick. No, 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 it just won't do," she continued. Richmond tried to keep the tears from falling down his cheeks, as he did not want to make Mother more upset. Once the lipstick was gone, Richmond was allowed to continue playing. Meanwhile, back in the present, that feeling of embarrassment crept up on Richmond's face again, snapping him back into the moment. "I can't have this," he muttered to himself as he stood up from his chair. Turning on his hi-fi player, Claire de Lune began to play over the speakers. The beautiful sound of Debussy soothed Richmond. The music drowned out the repeating line in his memory. "You look like a twit with Mummy's lipstick on," rang over and over in his head as he filled a glass full of red port wine. Mother's voice then began to fade as Richmond sipped, continuing his dinner. He ate quietly, trying not to look at the people outside too much. He spent the rest of the evening listening to his music and reading before going to bed, with his simple life and career awaiting him in the morning.
Change is a constant. A paradoxical oxymoron. It's all about time. Modern life has fundamentally changed our sense of time. We all live hectic lives these days. I heard Brian May of Queen say recently. Do we? Why? Is being busy a virtue in itself? But even as we live longer, we seem to think shorter. Is it because we cram more into each day, or because the next person seems to cram more into each day? Everything is happening much faster, and more things are happening. What are we trying to prove by consuming time in this way? Are we seeing everything, but understanding nothing? In the 60s we were taught that, in the future, machines would automate work, giving us more leisure time. But now machines automate the production of attention-consuming information, which takes up our time. Every minute of everyday life is to be used productively, or it's an opportunity lost. Businesses focus on short-term results, politicians focus on elections, school systems focus on test results. Everyone knows about the big problems, but their behavior focuses on the here and now. Best to concentrate on the current quarter, because who knows what job I'll have next year. Best to pass that test, but what I actually learn won't be worth much in 10 years from now. We are information rich but time poor. We're bombarded with so much information, from so many sources, video, audio, flashing screens. It's like being fed too much processed, sugar-rich food. We no longer can easily discern cause and effect, put together a coherent storyline, think scientifically, or read a book with a single theme. We click, click, click our way through the world. What's all the rush for? Is it a fear of running out of time? Is hectic a good thing? Something to be admired in itself? Does it make us happy? When I get the time, I'll have a look into this. Two lost souls. Dampness permeates the night air. Across the water, in the darkness, a police siren sounds and a church bell tolls. The lights of the city flicker in the distance. Cold waves brush the stony shore, illuminated by the pale and bright moonlight. A distant boat horn groans and wails. And then there is the sound of ungainly footsteps on a muddy track. A container ship slowly makes its way along the river, watched by a middle-aged lady with dark, straight, shoulder-length hair. She is standing at the river's edge, slightly smiling, as if in anticipation. A full moon shines through the broken clouds. The wind begins to pick up, and it whistles through the trees. A lighthouse pulses in the distance. The lady takes a breath and then walks away from the shore. Walking through the night, and through the woods, the lady comes across an isolated cottage. She looks cold, and her jacket is zipped up to the neck to keep the chill out. There are no lights on, in the detached house. She pauses, and then heads up to the front door. The moonlight casts a sharp shadow of the lady onto the wooden door frame. The woman takes out a Yale key and opens the door lock. The moonlight hits off her face, as she glances back over her shoulder, before entering. The house has 2 levels, and it looks in a well-maintained condition from the outside. She walks into the living room and switches on the light. Inside, the decor is modern, and the house appears to be lived in. She turns on some lamps, and the radio, and then she begins to have a look around. After her walk outside in the wind, Carol looks a bit disheveled, as she stands there, in the lamplit living room. But she's, by no means, an unattractive woman. She's probably about 5 foot 6 inches in height, and she has a full, rounded figure and ample bosom. Her face has even features, and she has dark brown eyes, and a pale complexion of smooth skin. Carol is dressed casually, wearing blue jeans, and a dark blue long cardigan, which is hanging wide open, over a green top of soft material which has 6 tight buttons leading up to a wide open neck. Her chest pushes out of the top of her blouse, just enough to draw attention. Carol flips through a photo album, while in the background, a news bulletin broadcasts from the radio. The female radio announcer voice says,
"It's also extremely grim out there, so please do take care on the roads this evening. Gale force winds are forecast for the rest of the night and severe weather warnings remain in place across the southwest and surrounding areas. It is really not very pleasant at all. Stay with us for updates on the weather situation every 15 minutes.
Carol picks up some framed pictures from the bookshelf and takes a close look at them.
And the headlines once again for the Southwest. The search continues for a missing patient who escaped from the Riverview Secure Unit earlier today. The resident should not be approached.
Carol is holding a small silver frame and touching the glass with her fingers.
The resident should not be approached and is described as being.
Carol is holding a small silver frame and touching the glass with her fingers. The picture is of a wholesome-looking male and female couple in their early 40s. He stands tall, wearing a wool jumper and shirt. She is about 4 or 5 inches shorter and has shoulder-length straight dark hair. At this point, there is a buzzing sound, and the mains electricity cuts out. The living room becomes dark. The radio had been plugged into the mains and so the living room is now silent. Carol lets out a sigh, and walks over to the wall light switch and clicks it back and forth. There is no power. Some moonlight is shining through the gaps in the window curtains, however. There is just enough moonlight, shining through the gaps in the curtains, for Carol to make out the outline of a small, circular, wooden table which has 4 glass candle holders sitting on it. 2 of the holders are opaque and star-shaped, while the other pair are round and clear. There is an electronic lighter on the bookshelf. Carol picks this up, flicks it, and lights up all 4 of the candles. One of the star-shaped candle holders is deep blue, while the other is dark green. The remaining 2 are clear and show a golden flame. The candles all glow away nicely on the small wooden table which Carol has now moved over to sit right next to a big, comfy, sofa chair which has wide, soft arms. There are folded wool blankets hanging over the back of the sofa chair, and the candlelight casts a wavering shadow of Carol's head onto the wall directly behind her. She momentarily looks over to the face of a ticking clock, sitting on top of the bookcase. The hands display a time of 25 past midnight. Carol sits back on the sofa, rests her head on the blankets, and tries to relax. Her legs are crossed, and her left foot sandshoe twitches up and down. Outside, the strong wind howls through the trees, shaking the branches. Eventually, Carol dozes off. Her eyeballs move slowly, back and forth, under her eyelids, as she begins to dream. Outside, there is the sharp sound of twigs cracking, under the force of footsteps. Then there is the sound of those footsteps, approaching the cottage. Carol continues to dream, and is unaware of this. Then, there is a loud, single knock on the door. Carol's eyes snap open wide. The handle of the door now rattles, repeatedly. Carol rises up from her chair, looking fearful. She stares at the front door, and then her gaze fixes on a stand next to the fireplace. The door handle rattles, again, impatiently. Carol's brow is deeply furrowed and her heart is pounding in her chest. She steps, quickly, to the fire stand and grabs a thick, iron poker. She holds it with both hands. There are 2 major voices in the English language, namely, Eric Blair, 1984, and Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. Let's look at both. Eric Blair used the pseudonym George Orwell for his written works. Whereas, Huxley was a bigwig, and so he was happy to pronounce himself. They were both passive voices, who made a difference. Both were more than capable of making sentences wordier. But they didn't. even although they were paid for their word count. Isaac has no voice, the sci-fi guru, got paid 5 cents a word, at the time, for writing pulp fiction on poor quality paper. And he didn't ever suffer from tautology. Effective writing is about communication, not showing off with your prose. For years, editors and style guides have frowned upon the passive voice. They think it is too limp. Like a British politician. In his 1946 essay, Politics and the English Language, a man who lived on the Isle of Bute, Scotland, known as George Orwell, suggested that the active voice should always be used in favor of the passive voice. He was right. And over the years, editors have agreed, often blindly changing sentences written in the passive voice. But the passive voice also has its benefits, and a good writer, or lazy author, should know when to use it. Sometimes, the active voice does a rubbish job of getting ideas across. Take this troublesome sentence, written in the active voice. I'm going to kick your head in, if you don't hand your holiday pay over to me, this minute. This can be pleasantly changed to, he demanded the bloke's cash. Remember, the goal is to keep your writing affordable. The passive voice sometimes allows you to guide your reader's attention down a blind alleyway. It's always good to start sentences with a capital letter and finish them with a dot, known as a full stop, or a period, if you come from across the pond. Let's imagine you're trying to write your first novel. Using the active voice might result in people being scared to read on, as you appear to be simply moaning about how other people have been mistreating you, all your life, and now this is payback time. Best to head for the attic and change the entire style of your manuscript. See you in 10 years? Thank you so much.
Hi there. For as long as I have lived in this house, which is only a couple of months, she has always been there every morning, through the rain, hail, sleet, and snow. She stands at my window every morning at 7 a.m. and looks at me through the window. I never knew her, and she never knew me, I think. For quite some time, I thought it was a girl who was living on our street, but I have never seen her anywhere, apart from outside my window, right next to the little pond. Every morning, I say hello, and she waves back. But the minute I turn away from the window, she disappears. The young lady always dresses the same. Beige dress with long sleeves, a sleeveless pink cardigan on top, baby pink thighs and beige boots. Are these her only clothes? Or are they just her favourite clothes? How does she manage to wear them every day? I tried doing that, but my clothes needed a wash after a couple of days. I've never told my parents about her. I don't know why, because I talk with my parents about everything. They know all my friends, except her. I have named her Girl Next Door, because when she started to appear, I thought that she lived next door. But even to this day, I don't know if she lives there or anywhere. For a while, I even believed that she simply didn't exist and that my mind had created her. But this surely couldn't be possible. She was very real. I see her every morning, and she is a real person. That's when I thought that maybe she was shy, and she will someday reach out when she wants to play with me. My parents wanted to remodel a room and to turn it into a training room. So they decided to rip apart the floor in order to install the heating system and the fitness mats. It should be a simple job that was going to be done by all of us. Hey, look at this. It seems to be a box, my dad said when he pulled an object from under the floor. He took the box out and rattled it. How strange to put that there. What could be inside? Said Mum. Let's see. It's a little hard to open, but I think I got it. My dad managed to prise it open. Inside, there was a bunch of papers, which looked like personal letters, and also some pictures. Maybe this belongs to the former owners. It looks like them. Look! The next picture that my dad pulled out made my heart skip a beat. It was her, the girl, exactly as I saw her this morning. The same clothes, smile, hair. I think this was their daughter, the one who died. My mum said, remember when they told us about her?
He wandered down the deserted street. There was no one around for him to meet. The clouds were gathering across the moon. The witching hour would be here soon. He pulled his collar up around his neck. He glanced behind him just to check. Hands in his pockets, he looked around, wary of that menacing sound. He knew the lady dressed in white only appeared at this time of night. She may appear and look quite pretty, even looking for some pity. Behind the face she shows you, she is evil through and through. She will use her womanly charms, locking you in her rotting arms, capturing you in a deadly spell, putting you to sleep with her noxious smell, sucking out your every breath, as she gives her kiss of death. If she sees you, she'll draw you in. You could resist, but she will win. Her hollow eyes, her screeching voice, petrified, you'll have no choice. Standing rooted to the ground, her next victim she has found. She'll gather round your frozen frame. To capture your soul is her aim. Once she has you in her grasp, your last breath you will gasp. Is it your ambition to be a famous author? Think again. You're not being realistic. You have as much chance of achieving this as you have of earning a living from playing snooker or football. That is, unless you write a book called How to Make Money Quickly and use the pseudonym Robin Banks. Having a strong drink is essential to nearly all writing. Write when you are tipsy, and edit when you are sober. And you will need to have a strong lead character. That won't be you. If you've just finished your book,
After years of slogging away, you may be excited about how your readers are going to react. Don't be. No one will want to read your novel. It's already out of date and completely off-trend. People often think they can sell their household junk at a car boot sale, or get someone to part with lots of cash for their ancient rust bucket of a car. But these people are deluded. The same applies to writing. You don't have a readership. This is because nobody wants to read your stuff. It simply doesn't interest them. They are much more attracted to watching YouTube videos or peering at their phone. The truth is, most people have many other things to occupy themselves. Too many. And reading your latest book is not at the top of their priority list. Sorry to have to break that to you so bluntly.